this curtain, that's the Holy of Holies. That's where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. The Ark was made out of acacia wood. So when I say Ark, I mean the box part. Okay? So you have the box, and then you have the covering of the box. That's what this is. So the box was made out of acacia wood covered with gold. Its covering was solid gold, but these cherubims don't really have any measurements. So we'll to say how big everything is in here. We know that the covering of the box had one cherubim on either end, with their bodies one towards the other, their faces downward towards the covering, and their wings spread up and over the ark. Why is it called the Ark of the Covenant? Because inside it has the covenant of Sinai, the stone tablets. Remember, these are the second stone tablets though, because the first ones were broken by Moses, the second ones were put inside. And then you had three more things inside the Holy of Holies. You had a bowl of manna. This was to remind the children of Israel of how God provided for them when they were wandering in the wilderness. You had the staff of Aaron. This was to remind the children of Israel not to rebel against God. And then you had the book of the law. Okay, so if you look at Deuteronomy chapter 31, it says that when Moses finished writing the book of the law, it says that he takes the book, he gives it to the Levites, and he tells the Levites to put it alongside the ark. So that was put in here as well. Okay, not inside the ark, but alongside the ark. Okay? All right. Back to the Day of Atonement. When the high priest enters in here, remember I said that he lights smoke? Why does he light smoke? Why does he light the incense? Are you allowed to see the presence of God? You're not supposed to see God face to face, right? Again, because of sin. So we're going to talk about outside. But you're not supposed to see God face to face. If you look in Exodus chapter 25, there's a very beautiful verse where God says, I will speak to you and I will meet with you from between the cherubims and the covering of the ark. This is God's meeting with the people. This is where God says that he would appear. Now the high priest is not supposed to see that. So that incense, it says, would actually kind of make kind of a cloud over this so that he actually wouldn't see that clearly. So it kind of creates this temporary separation for as long as he's in here. Right? So that smoke, that incense would actually cover this so that he can do his job, so that he wouldn't die, so he doesn't see God. So he takes the blood that's with him and he sprinkles the blood onto the covering of the ark for the payment of sin, for the atonement for the people, and for himself. Remember, also for himself, also for the people. So both of those are brought over here. He also does the same thing in front of the ark, and on the incense altar, and on the altar of sacrifice. So he kind of starts over here, and he heads out. This blood was doing two things. First of all, it's for atonement, right? For the atonement of the people. But it's also for the cleaning of this place. Cleaning from what? From all the people that live around here and all the people that work here. They're all sinful. This is God's holy place. If he didn't want any sin around here, then nobody would ever enter in here. Nobody would ever even be camped around here. In a way, God is actually being very patient with the people because throughout the years, throughout the year, they're also sinning, and there are also things that they're doing wrong, maybe forgetting or whatever it may be. So on the plate, that day itself, the place is also clean from them, from the workers of the place. Okay. Now I have a question. What does he do after he sprinkles the blood over here? What does he do next year? Is he out of a job? Does he retire? Is his work finished? The high priest finishes his work either when he's dead or when the people stop sinning. Which means he'll be here next year, unless he dies. Because the people will certainly have sins again this year, and he's going to have atonement for them next year as well. So next year, exactly 1 year, he'll be doing exactly the same thing. And the next year after that, and after that, and after that. You can see that this work never finishes. This work is never completed. Right? It always has to be done again. How many sacrifices in total, how many days of atonement in total does it take until a person is made perfect? Until a person doesn't even have anything left from sin. No separation from God. Once you have 1 million sacrifices, what's the number? 1 million, 2 million? How many sacrifices until a person can enter into God's dwelling place, into God's presence, and just stay here? It's never going to happen through those sacrifices, right? If you had a debt to pay, let's say you borrowed money from someone, and they said, okay, so you can pay it back month after month after month, and you've been paying it back for over 1,000 years, and you're asking, okay, well, how much is left? How much do I actually have to pay? And the person tells you, oh, it's endless. You just have to keep paying every month, right? You can see how that's a little frustrating. You can see that that's never actually going to be paid out. So this was going on for over 1,000 years, and the people were still sinful, and God was still holy, so they're still separated. It's just exactly the same from the first day And 1,000 years later, still exactly the same thing is going on, right? Through these sacrifices, there's very little hope to ever become perfect and to ever enter into God's presence. It wasn't going to happen through this. It was showing what needed to be done, right? It was showing that God was holy and that payment for sin has to be made, but it wasn't actually paying for that sin. So what happens in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 31? God says that he was like a husband to Israel. He says that even though he was like a husband to Israel, they have broken his covenant. So what does he say? Let's forget about Israel and throw him away? No, he says, I'll actually make a new covenant with them. And he says that this new covenant will not be exactly like the covenant of Sinai, because the law and the covenant, which we talked about, right, the stone tablets, right, they're called the tablets of the covenant. Those were written on stone, written by God, written onto stone, and presented to the people of the things that they should do and not do. Okay? What about this new law and that covenant that comes with it? Or I should say the covenant and the law that comes with it. God says, I will write it on their hearts. Not onto stone tablets like the covenant of Sinai. He says, I will write it on their hearts. So still God writing it, but not onto tablets of stone, but personally onto every person that's going to be under that new covenant. What's the continuing verse over there? God says, I will forgive their sins and remember their iniquities no more. If the forgiveness of sin was provided through these sacrifices or through the blood of these animals, then why would you need a new covenant that's for the forgiveness of sin? Again, remember, through these it wasn't going to happen, so you need a new covenant and a different kind of sacrifice. And where is that provided? Where do you find that? At the cross, where the new covenant is made for the full and the complete payment for sin. Not a partial payment, not until next year. You don't have to wait until next Passover or until next Day of Atonement or whatever it may be. It's once and for all. One sacrifice, the high priest Jesus, the high priest of the New Testament, sacrificing himself only once, because that's all that's needed. And after that one sacrifice, what does he say? It's finished.
It's finished.
Completed, right? That's something that the high priest in the Old Testament never did. Never could have done. Right? To say that you give one sacrifice and your work is finished, that's like blasphemy. It's like, that's ridiculous. How could you even say that? You could give 1,000,000 sacrifices and your work is not finished. How dare you say that after one? Because that one was all that was needed for the salvation of people. Right? So he dies on the cross, and what happens? The Ba'ochet, this curtain behind you, was torn from top to bottom. This is a symbol of that separation between God and between the people, and it was canceled thanks to that sacrifice. Not thanks to any other sacrifice, by the way. It only tore on that specific sacrifice because it was showing that sacrifice did something that no other sacrifice ever did or ever could have done. Because it provides entrance into the Holy of Holies, that sacrifice. So what is that called? Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father but through me. He's the access. He's the entrance actually into God, into God's presence. Those sacrifices could have never given that, could have never provided for it. In the book of Hebrews, it talks about Jesus as being that high priest, the perfect high priest, who's not like the high priest from the Old Testament, who were sinful people. He was a person who had no sin, so he had nothing to even, he had no even need for this. Right? Everyone else had needed atonement, even these priests. But Jesus is the only person ever who did not need any work to be done for himself, because he was without sin. So he could be the sacrifice for others. So he doesn't sacrifice a bull or a goat. If you remember, those are the two sacrifices that were brought over here. But he gives himself. Not a bull, not a goat, but the Lamb of God that is given, that is slain for the forgiveness, for the atonement of the people. But again, not partially, not temporarily. You have to remember that under the new covenant, it's done differently than under the old covenant. And so what's the covenant of the new, what's the temple, of the new covenant? If you remember, this is a temple, right? This is first called a temple, Mikdash. Mikdash means a holy place. So this is the first dwelling place of God, talked about, right? This is the tabernacle, okay? But what's the covenant? This is from the covenant of Sinai, but what's the new temple? The temple that's the covenant, that's the temple of the new covenant. The people themselves, right? The people are actually called the temple of God under that new covenant, because the place itself, once the person is purified by the work of Jesus the high priest, it can be used as the dwelling place of God's presence, of God's Spirit. That's why the people themselves are actually called the dwelling place of God, the temples of God, under that new covenant. So thank you very much for listening, everybody. If you have any questions or anything, you can feel free to ask. Or, yeah.
Well, the Jews do not believe Jesus Christ.
Yes, the Jews.
No, they don't believe in the New Testament or what it talks about.
Yeah.